A couple of words about me. I'm a Java champion. I've been coding Java since '95. I'm an expert group member of the security JSR, which I'm going to talk to you about today. I'm also in the expert group for a couple of other JSRs as well. And I'm a member of the NetBeans Dream Team, so I'll show you some NetBeans features today as well. So, and you can see my Twitter and stuff there if you want to go. I'm also a jug leader for the Java Jug in Malmö in Sweden. And I work for a company called Cybercom in Sweden, and we're where I work as a principal consultant, so I'm often out speaking at events like this and stuff. But I also do real coding for work. So what I'll do is to go through a little bit of history, future, and the status of JSR 375. Then I'll show some demos and samples, and I'll talk a little bit about what's next for this JSR. And has anybody heard about JSR 375 before? Do you know what a JSR is? Okay, yeah, good. So JSR is a Java specification request. It's run by the Java community process. And this is a JSR that is planned for Java EE8. And I'll also go into a little bit about the future after Java EE8. But first, let's start with some history of JSR 375. So this is the timeline. And the JSR was initiated with a final proposal in August in 2014. Then in December the same year, it was approved by the executive committee. And in March, the expert group was formed in March 2015. And then after Java 1 in 2015, it passed the renewal ballot in the JCP, which is a part of the JCP process. And then actually nothing happened until more or less today, where we are in October 2016. And this period in between here is kind of what's been going on or not been going on. I don't know if you know about the hiatus of the JSRs that have been led by Oracle, and it's kind of frustrating to be in an expert group when nothing is happening. But luckily, we have had some members in this expert group that are really active, and we have been going on, and that's why I have something really cool to show here today, because it has been a great deal of work being done, even though not led by the specification lead. And what happened when the expert group was formed is in the first month we had an explosion of ideas. We had a session which is kind of ad hoc session at JavaLand in 2015, where we just said, hey, this is what we're going to do, and then we actually on stage submitted things to our GitHub repo. So we started doing things in the first month. We had, I think it was 237 mails and 81 commits to the proposals repo during the first month. And we filed 24 Jira issues. And we started working with lots of ideas, and we just had to limit it down to what we're delivering today. And now I'm just going to pause a little bit about what we have done and what we are doing right now, and look a little bit ahead. Because as you see, this red area of nothing going on has ended. And at Java 1 this year, Oracle proposed a suggested proposal for a roadmap for Java EE. And as you see, there is clearly a focus towards microservices and cloud. That is, for EE8, we will have an initial microservices support. And in EE9, we will have enhanced microservices support. And this obviously has some impact on security as well. And why is the reason for all of this? Well, the shape of the enterprise app is changing. We're not building the applications the way we did a couple of years ago. You know, A couple of years ago, we didn't talk about microservices. But now we can't have a talk without talking about microservices. So it's clearly something happening. And there's still a need for a monolithic application. It still has a valid use cases. And security is for all of these use cases. We need to support the on-premise solutions. We need to support the hybrid solutions. We need to support the cloud deployments. And we need to support microservices in the cloud. So there is a lot of things that impact security with this shift of building applications. And back to some of the ideas that came up the first couple of weeks of the expert group, is that these are the original ideas we came up with, what we wanted to do with this JSR. And that is, we wanted to standardize the terminology. So we know what we're talking about when we talk about security. And we wanted to create an API for authentication mechanism that was general. And an API for identity store, security context, password aliasing, and role permission assignment, and authorization interceptors. All this is stuff we just wanted to get a line across the implementations. Because there are proprietary solutions out there that supports all of this. But we want to create a standard, and we want to do it take the low-hanging fruits first. And if you look at the four first of these items, these are actually a pretty good fit for cloud development as well. These are relevant use cases for cloud. The three at the bottom, maybe not so. So that is why the proposed way forward for this expert group is to focus on these four items for Java EE8. And then refine a little bit what we're talking about for Java EE9. And then topics like authentication and different authentication mechanisms like OpenID Connect and authorization mechanisms such as OAuth, for example. And when you're talking about microservices and services calling each other, you need to have some kind of support for secret management. Where do you store the keys for the interfacing systems? And how do you do it? And how do you obtain them? Wouldn't it be nice to have a standard way of doing this? And that's what we're thinking about here. And also, there are some security around microservices that are different from other applications, and we want to address those things as well. And also, we need to see a standard way of packaging this security and configuration, so we do it in a cloud-friendly way. So let's look at first some of these items for Java EE9. Then I'll swap back to Java EE8 focus, since that's what's closest to us. And I'll also show some demos and how far we come with these four first items. But first, these items at the bottom. So what we do is to standardize and abstract the necessary configuration, and we want it to be configurable at deployment. And that means that we need to have a standard security context across the platform. We need to know how we represent user identities and group memberships. And for authorization, we need to have some sort of OAuth support. We need to find a way maybe to discover and publish the OAuth resources. And how do you register a client for OAuth authorization? So we probably need some authorization interceptors. We need some kind of rules, expression language maybe, and some way to assign roles and permissions. And also the secret. We need some way to manage the secrets, the keys to access the different systems. As when we make our applications more and more distributed, we need to have some standard way of handling these secrets, and some way of binding these secrets at deployments. Have some standard way to handle these key management systems. So it's all about standardization. It's probably solutions out there, but we want to do it in a standard way. So what we need for securing microservices is maybe some identity service. So since we're not doing identity management within an application, we're doing identity management between services. So we probably need some identity service mechanism. And we need, as I said, some secrets management. That's what we talked about. We need some kind of authorization service maybe, so we can abstract away what authorization mechanism we're using in the application. And we need to be able to mix in this functionality as needed. And also, when microservices come in, we need to think about the packaging and life cycles. And we need to standardize the security configuration and externalize it so we can bind it at deployment. So these are things that are not very well defined. We're just throwing it at the table and say, this is probably something we're going to need. So it's not said that this is what we're going to do, but these are proposals. So we're thankful for everybody who can contribute to this just by subscribing to the mailing list and posting things to us on Twitter and any channel we can reach us on. Just come with it, because we need input to be able to do this. I'll show you some resources where you can provide input later. So that was a bit future thinking, abstract. Now let's go into more concrete things and what we actually have done today, and look at the status of what's been done in JSR 375. And that brings us back to these four items that is meant for Java EE8. And let's start then with terminology. And this may seem like a simple or maybe kind of, why do we need this topic? But if you start thinking of it and start digging in security, you see, is it a user or is it a caller that is calling something? Traditionally, for a web application, it would be a user that logs in. But how it is for services and microservices? Is it a user still, or is it a system or another service logging in? And that is, whether you call it a user or caller, maybe it doesn't matter, but it's nice to have something that is general, and so you know what you're talking about, and not call it different things with different places in your application. And is it a group of user permissions? How do you map users to roles and groups and so on? And if you look at the application servers today, there are different ways of doing it, and they call it different things everywhere. And then what is it that you use to authenticate your user? Is it a authentication mechanism, or is it the authentication something else? And where do you store these identities? What do you call it? Is it a user store, identity store, or whatever? So if I try to think back of what we have decided on, I think the two latest one, authentication mechanism and identity store, is something that we have agreed on and have started using. And if I remember correctly, we want to call the item calling the system a caller, not a user. So if you're used to calling is user enrolled, for example, we would like to have it being called is caller enrolled, because you don't know if it is actually a user or another system. But these are things that are not final, we're working on it. So, authentication mechanism. What we want to do is to have a portable API for authentication mechanism. And we want to abstract away the specifics of the identity store, and what the identity store to use for authentication. We want the configuration to be simple. We want the application to be able to handle this itself, and we don't want any proprietary solutions. And the status today is that there are proprietary server support in any Java EE application. But you do differently if you use Wildfire or Liberty or Glassfish. It's different ways of doing it. So if you're porting your application from one vendor to another, you need to do the security configuration in a proprietary way. There are third-party solution frameworks out there to provide authentication for you. like Spring Security, for example. And you have this JASPIC, which is a service provider interface for containers. So the containers can implement the authentication service and hook into the container. And one of our goals is to use JASPIC as much as possible, but that is nothing we want end users to know anything about, actually. So how does it look, the way we come from it? Well, we've defined that one authentication mechanism that is widely used is basic authentication. And we want to be able to have an annotation in your application that is just at basic authentication mechanism provider definition. And you say which realm this is for, and just annotate your, for example, servlet with it. I'll show demos afterwards. And form-based authentication is also something that is pretty useful. So we want to be able to annotate your method with a form-based authentication definition, and say which login page or error page are you using. Or if you don't want to use the custom, the default form-based, you can also have a custom form authentication mechanism where you create the form yourself. So these are a couple of things that we have created examples for and implemented in the API, and it's possible to add more afterwards. And then we also want to abstract the identity store and have simple configuration support, so we can support a variety of identity stores. Lightweight for development, maybe you want an in-memory identity store, or you want to support database identity store or ldap, for example. So, or maybe in the future we will also support more cloud-specific identity stores, or like social logins, so you can log in with Facebook or Google or whatever, and third-party cloud identity providers. And we want to have a way to support multiple identity stores and have an order way of going through them. For example, if you have external and internal users in the application, we want to have them in different identity stores. And we want to support a variety of credential types, like the username, password, the OAuth, and tokens, and etc. So what's the status today? There is no Java EE standard support. There are proprietary server support. And there are third-party security frameworks that provide this for you. So how do we want to do it then? Well, we have support for the most common ones. This is an embedded identity store, an in-memory identity store you can use for prototyping or development, or just for testing out things. So you can embed annotate your application with an embedded identity store definition, and just have the passwords and the users there. Very simple. Or you can have the database version where you just, in this case, you can actually just define the queries for where you get the users and groups. Or the ldap version where you just point to the ldap where you're storing. And I'll show demos of this afterwards. This is what we have so far. And then you have the security context. And what we want to do is have one security context and have it consistent regardless of which container you're in. If you think about it today and inject the security context in a servlet, it's different from if you inject it in an EJB or if you inject it in a JXRS resource. It's different signatures. They call it, some places you can call the method I call is user enroll, and some places they call in caller enroll, and it's different what they call the things. And what we want the security context is to determine which identity provider I've used, and which groups or roles the user belongs to. So currently there are no JavaDay standard support, but there are third-party solutions for this. So what have we done? Well, so far we have defined the authenticate method because that's what we need from the authentication mechanism to implement that. But we haven't started on defining the entire all the methods of the security context. That's an epic that is ongoing. So we just is going to. So if you have input to this, you should contact the expert group. So you've probably seen this guy around. And this is actually the logotype we've got for this JSR. It's a duke with a sword. And we have a reference implementation. It's called Sotiria. Let me see here. And Sotiria is from Greek mythology. It's a goddess for safety and salvation. So it's a pretty good fit for a security implementation. We actually had a vote in the security expert group, what should we call the reference implementation, and Sotiria was the most popular one. And even if the reference implementation for a security specification is actually only required to work for Glassfish, then one guy in the expert group, Argent Times, he's done a tremendous job of creating a portable reference implementation. So Sotiria today works for Wildfly, it works for Liberty, it works for Payara, and it works for Tommy, and I think it partially works for WebLogic as well. So we have a almost fully portable reference implementation of the security specification. That brings us over to a demo. I'll just sit down here. First of all, I want to show the Github repo. Okay, I'll switch screens here. There we go. We're on GitHub. It's the Java security spec. You can go in here and see everything. We have the security proposals. Here's where everybody can commit proposals and try out things and just see what's going to work. We have some examples that we used in the beginning. The most important one is this Sotiria. Currently, we have the API here as well. So we have the API, we have the implementation of Sotiria, and we have the integration tests and samples, which I'm going to show some of them today. And we have examples for most use cases, like the multiple identity store, the memory-based and the form-based and custom forms and ldap and etc. I'll show a couple of these today. We just created Docker profiles so you can build them and run them in Docker, so you don't need all application servers installed if you want to try it out. So I'll show you how to do that. So if you want to know more about the security spec, this is the place to go. Let me see here. So let's look at the most basic one, which is just a memory-based identity store. And this is more or less just a simple servlet. And as you see, I'm using the @basic authentication mechanism definition. It's a long annotation name, and just a test realm. And I'm using an embedded identity store. Then is a regular servlet, and these roles are declared. This is standard servlet stuff. And then I say that only the users with foo is allowed to call this one. And I just print out the username I get from the request. So if I run this one, anyone want to choose which application server I should use? What about Websphere? Do you use Websphere? You like Websphere? Okay. I feel with you, but actually, if you look at the new Liberty profile from Websphere, it's the fastest one in terms of startup time, and it's a pretty low footprint if you use the Docker image. So if you want to look at a new application server and if tired of Wildfly or whatever you're using, try out Liberty. It's fast. I'll just use the, here you can see I'm using NetBeans, and of course we have Docker support. So I just find one of my images here, and we can see here I have the main basic Liberty. I've just run this one. Let me keep these. Just add the export port. Yeah, just run it. It's a bit slower to start up here since I'm running through NetBeans. If I run from command, it's actually quicker. This one it loads the application I showed you, plus it also loads the Sotiria, which I've added. And here it is. So if I go into a base again, it's port 9080, I think I've said. So I get this is basic authentication. So if I log in with the RISA and secret one, which was defined, I get in here and I'll lift it up. You see that it has the foo and bar, but not the CAS. And if I look at the code in my identity store, you can see RISA here, yes, foo and bar. So I'm using the embedded identity store here. And if I want to change this, I just stop my Liberty container, or I can just leave it running. If I now want to add a user here, for example, since we're in Game of Thrones, I'm told that he's called Jon Snow, and he is maybe only foo, like this. Just add a user. Of course, I have to rebuild my application. Is it readable? Let's see. And I just maybe clean install Docker build. I can skip tests, and I have to profile it. Do you want to run it in Wildfly? Wildfly Docker. All these applications are running Archillian integration tests. So if you don't skip tests, it's going to run a test and load. It's actually going to start up, depending on which profile you choose. It's going to fire up the application server. So if you choose to run the profile for Wildfly, Payara, Tommy, and Liberty, it's going to take some time to do the build, because it's going to fire up all these Archillian containers afterwards. But here you see I built this Wildfly image of the appmem basics. So just run it here from command line on 8080. Are you using Docker? Yeah. So here I fire up Wildfly in Docker container with the new application I had. So there it should be running, and if I open a new window here, I should go to 8080, the same one, and if I go in with Jon Snow, I should log in, and you see he's only got foo, the way I defined it. So it's pretty fast for if you're prototyping and developing using this in memory, but actually nothing you'd use for production probably. So let's stop this one, and I'll go back to NetBeans and stop my container here so we don't slow down my computer too much. There you go. Stop. And let's look at some other examples. So if we look at the form-based, I also have here a servlet, but rather than using the basic authentication mechanism, I'm using a form-based authentication mechanism. Otherwise, this one is exactly the same, and the servlet is on the do-get method is exactly the same. Or the do post is exactly the same, and here it's just yeah, it's just the same as and he's using this standard login form, which is J security context to log in. So if I run this one, I think I have it built, so we don't have to do that. Mem form on Liberty, okay. Go run. Let's run 8080, 9080. I don't know why Liberty want to run on 9080, but there's probably some history about it. So while this one starts up, I'll just go in here and I'll go to localhost 8080 and I got it appmem form servlet. And see here I get a form to log in, and I haven't specified which form it is. So this is the standard stuff you just get. And if I log in with, I think I saved the password here, I go in and I'm logged in. And I can also, if I want to do the custom form where I actually provide the login form myself here. Where I create a custom form if we want to have some other stuff there, and then just the username and password. And I have here a backend bean that just collects the username and password for me, and it does the login exactly the same way. So this one is just using the custom form authentication mechanism, and it has an embedded store, and otherwise it's exactly the same. So I'll just skip that demo and go to let me see, this custom. That's an interesting one. Here it's the same servlet, but here I don't define any authentication mechanism at all. But I've created a class here with my custom, which implement this HTTP authentication mechanism, and Sotiria will discover that this one is on the class path and use CDI to inject it and use it, rather than the default one we were providing. So here is actually, if you want to implement it yourself, you implement this HTTP authentication mechanism interface from the API, and here it just checks for the username password in the request and logs in if it's in the identity store. And in the identity store, just check that it's resign and secret one. So it's a very hard-coding example, but it's pretty cool anyway. So let's see if I can run this one. This is Sotiria. Do I have the custom one? Right. Which one? Payara. I also need to go. So, well, this one is building. I'm using the for these examples the Maven plugin from Spotify. Are you using Maven to build your Docker images, or are you creating Docker files? Anybody using the Spotify plugin? Yeah, cool. Do you like it? Anybody using some other Maven plugins? There are some other options out there. I kind of like the Spotify one for simplicity. Let's see here. Here's the one for Payara, the one I'm running now. It's pretty easy. It's just to say I'm using the Docker, and I'm saying let's use the Payara server base image, and this is what I want to call it, and this is where I want to put my WAR file, and this is my WAR file. So I just say, hey, put my WAR file in the auto deploy directory, and as an entry point, I just want to start the default domain. So it's pretty easy to use, and this is a full-blown Java EE server running in a Docker container. Custom, wasn't it? And Payara, you know Payara? Payara is a commercially supported version fork from Glassfish. So you see it's Glassfish starting up here, but it is Payara that provides the fork of it. And they do some bug fixes, and they maintain it, and you can get support if you want. So let's see here. 8080 and this one called app custom, and if I just go in, it's not found. Is it called something else? Let me see. It should be app. I need the servlet. There. You see, I'm not logged in here since I haven't provided anything. So if I provide the name, like Reza, and password, click secret one. I log in, and you see I'm logged in. So this was using a custom identity store, which you can implement in any way you want yourself. Of course, you can use the ldap one as well. And this is an example where we're just calling the local ldap repository. And in this case, we've just at startup, just have an in-memory ldap in the application store. Normally, you'd actually configure something external to your application. And the test authentication mechanism is just calling the identity store and do the validations against it, and you get the ldap validation. So do you want to run this one as well, or you seen enough? Yeah. So what I recommend is to let me see here. Go to the GitHub repo, go into the Sotiria, check the test stuff, check whichever you want. Here's the multiple stores, and etc. Test them out, try them out, provide feedback. If you want to fix something, if you see something is wrong, send a pull request. So it's easy as that. See, there we are. So if you saw my tweet before the show, you saw I asked, can Jon Snow log into the application using the JSR security? And the answer to that you saw is yes, he can. So to sum up, what's next for JSR 375? Yeah, the first thing we're going to do is to build a foundation for identity so we can use it, and this is going to be within Java EE8. And as you see, we've come pretty far. There is something to do left, and there is a way to go, but we are pretty good on schedule for Java EE8, which is scheduled for October next year. So we have 1 year, and we should be able to build a pretty good foundation for identity handling in Java EE by then. The candidates for focus for Java EE9, it hasn't been decided on yet, but it's probably going to be something involving security for and packaging and configuration and the build, how to get it into your applications. And it's definitely going to be support for what you need in your microservices applications. And what we wanted to do is the Java EE security, we want it to be simple, consistent, and secure. And we have Sotiria running in all these containers. You can try it out. I didn't show Tommy today, but Tommy actually was, I think it was earlier this week or in the middle of the week, we got the last fix from Tommy that makes them support Sotiria all the way. So you need to get the latest snapshot of Tommy, then it works. So that means all these application servers are pretty or very good at following the specifications and implementing it in a correct way, because we're using pretty extensive CDI mechanisms and stuff to get it running. So it's all these are really good and supports it very well. So Sotiria is the reference implementation. Of course, we're on Twitter, both the Sotiria RI and the JSR 375. Follow us, tweet about us, send questions, whatever you want. And if you want to find out anything more about the project, read about the epics, check out the Jira, all the issues, what we're working with, how to subscribe to the mailing list and stuff, go to our project page on java.net. It's probably going to move soon, because if you probably heard that java.net is going to be shut down. So sometime in the mid next year, we have to move somewhere else, and I would guess it's going to be GitHub, but you never know. It's probably going to be. We are on GitHub. All the code is there. We're doing the development there, and we're just pushing it to the java.net repo upstream. So in GitHub, you can actually see every commit we're doing in the reference implementation, the API, and the specification, and it's fully open source. So you can there's nothing secret going on there. We have a mailing list for users. You can subscribe to it, and everything that's going on the expert list is coming to the users mailing list as well, and you can post messages to the experts on the users mailing list, so we answer there. And don't forget about the Java EE8 survey. If you haven't done it yet, go in, and want to remember one thing from this session. This is a URL to go to afterwards. This is, I think it's 20-something questions about what you want to see in Java EE8. So this is your opportunity to influence your future in the next following maybe 5 years. And this survey closes October 21st, so we have approximately 1 week. So if you haven't done it, do it. And there are some questions about security there as well. So I recommend to go into this URL, glassfish.org/survey. So that's what I had today. I hope you enjoyed the session. I'm here the rest of the day, and I don't bite, so just approach me if you have any questions. And I think we have 3 minutes for questions. Yes? So the question is, are most of the JSRs going to move to GitHub, or what is going to happen? Yes, I think so, but I think they will probably move the same place. Oracle has a organization structure on GitHub. I don't know if it's going to be under there or where it's going to be. The 3 JSRs I'm involved in are on GitHub. But the JMS one is not. It's some license stuff that we can't publish the stuff there because it's a proprietary license, and the official repo is Subversion, believe it or not. But the JMS is kind of the it's modern cool stuff we're doing, but it's an old specification, so it's the old stuff has followed. But when we move it to Subversion, it's going to be there. To GitHub, it's going to be there. The MVC spec is on GitHub. We mirror the stuff there. I think the CDI spec is on GitHub. So CDI spec is kind of the spec we look at for an example how to do things, because they do things very openly and very in community-driven way. So I hope that all specifications will kind of follow that standard. So if it's going to be GitHub or something else, I don't know. The issue I see they're discussing about GitHub is that since there are some licensing and who are allowed to commit, they need to have some kind of mechanism to verify that you have signed the appropriate agreements before they accept pull requests. But they are talking about it, and as I said, there is a deadline next year when JavaDay is shut down. So, any more questions? Yes. If it's possible to switch. Okay, so the question is if it's possible to specify the business rules for security. Do you mean like if this user has access to this data set and that stuff? Right now it's not, but that's definitely something that would be nice. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much for listening, and see you around.